Okay, so remember all the times Trump said something like this?
We're going to be returning education very simply back to the states where it belongs. Your state is going to control your children's education. We're going to move education into the states. Let the states run the schools.
Well, apparently that doesn't apply across the board. This week, the Trump administration told state education officials they have just 10 days to prove they've eliminated all diversity, equity, and inclusion programs from public schools, or they will risk losing federal funding. Now, here's the catch, one of the catches, if that doesn't already sound terrible. The Department of Education hasn't even defined what counts as DEI, so schools will have to guess what programs they need to eliminate. Does that mean teaching Black history, multicultural programs? Does it mean MLK celebrations? And if this sounds like it wasn't exactly thought out, that's because it wasn't. The DOE says they'll evaluate violations on a case-by-case basis. What does that mean? I mean, basically, they'll make it up as they go along. So let's be clear, this isn't just about DEI. Project 2025 calls for phasing out federal education funding entirely over the next decade. And what this does is create two different Americas for students when it comes to education. In states like New York or Connecticut, where federal funds make up less than 10% of school budgets, maybe many of the schools could weather the storm. But in places like Mississippi or Kentucky and most inner cities, where nearly a quarter of school funding comes from the federal government, the fallout could be devastating for a generation of kids. Joining me now is the former Secretary of Education under President Biden, Miguel Cardona. Secretary Cardona, my kids are in public school. I think so many people out there watching are wondering what all of this means. And we hear a lot of debates about what federal funding for federal schools and the impact it will be. But for many communities, especially in rural and lower income areas, that money is essential. I mean, I named some of the disparities with states. Can you just explain to people how much of an impact pulling federal funding would have on public schools across the country?
Yeah. Absolutely. But first of all, I would just want to say I'm so happy to see you. So proud of what you're doing. Thank you for having me. And no, you're right. You know, and I look at this also from the lens of a parent, you know, and we want to make sure that our students are getting more, not less. And I think what we're seeing here is the students who are furthest from opportunity, or the students that need the most support, are the ones that are going to be impacted the most. The 26 million students who are economically disadvantaged, many of them in rural communities. We have 9 million rural students. Students with disabilities, 7 million students across the country who risk having services provided for them, and the 17 million students who are looking to Pell Grants so they can go to college. So, you know, it's, as you said earlier, they're short on specifics, but I think the threat is there, and we have schools right now scrambling to figure out what it means. You know, does cutting DEI, Jen, mean that we're going to limit opportunities for children with autism or children with Down syndrome to participate in unified sports? Or does it mean that we don't look at the inequity around STEM classes for our girls? We want to recruit girls into STEM programs so they could have access to these high-skill, high-paying careers, right? But that's equity. So educators across the country are scrambling to try to figure this out. And, you know, it's a threat. And as you said before, it's pretty ironic that as they're talking about giving control to the states, there's more federal oversight or threats than ever before. So it is ironic, but educators right now are just trying to serve their children. It's not red or blue. This is about making sure our kids have opportunities.
I know that, and I know you. I mean, you came to the job as secretary as an educator, which was one of the things that really, drove your time serving in that role. I mean, one of the things that this announcement about DEI, the need to cut DEI programs and the threat of cutting federal funding has made me think about, and I would love for you to speak about this as an educator, is just how do you teach history to students if you have to cut out Black history, if you can't do MLK celebrations, if you can't teach to students with disabilities, or you can't promote STEM for girls? How do you do that as an educator?
You know, it's really basic. How do you do your job to help students learn about our country and the pride of being an American? This is a special, special country where we have people from all over coming here under one flag. How do you do that worrying that somebody's looking over your shoulder and threatening to cut funds that are going to hurt the students? You know, it really challenges educators at a time where it's already tough to be an educator. So, you know, but Jen, you know, I really feel that our educators, we've weathered storms before. We're going to focus on our students, making sure our families are connected. But it provides another challenge when we know the federal government has no role in curriculum development. It seems like there's inserting themselves now in a way that just doesn't work. I was a commissioner of education before. Look, I had more control in curriculum when I was a fourth grade teacher than I did when I was Secretary of Education. And it seems like that's being changed now, and it's to the detriment of students, especially when the folks that are making these decisions have never stepped foot in a public school as a student.
You know, one of the other things that's happened recently is the Supreme Court recently allowed Trump to cancel grants meant to recruit teachers in low-income and rural areas. And you just talked about the impact on rural communities, lower-income communities. These grants were designed, as I understand them, to help close equity gaps in the classroom. What does that tell you about the types of education programs that are on the chopping block? I know you've referenced this a little bit, but I think it's so important for people to understand the impact these cuts have on people's lives.
You know, the students furthest from opportunity are the ones that are going to be impacted the most. And this is something that should concern everyone. How do we grow an economy if we have two systems for education? I personally believe that this is an attempt to dismantle not only the Department of Education, but public education, to make a public good something that becomes privatized or monetized. So I think it's really important for all of us to really come together, depoliticize education, focusing on what's most important and making sure that every kid has opportunity to succeed.
Secretary Cardona, it is such a pleasure speaking with you. I think so many parents out there and grandparents and caregivers are trying to make sense of what this all means and what's more important than kids in school and giving them a shot. I so appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much.
Yeah.